But the tiger was Tipu's obsession.
Tipu's tiger is a musical automaton made as the toy of Tipu Sultan. It contains an organ, pipe and bellows mechanism and a keyboard. I have a very simple tiger tune from South India which I thought it would be appropriate to play on the Tipu keyboard. The Tipu keyboard is a series of buttons and it lacks the black sharps that one associates with a piano. Therefore, when playing this tiger tune, you have to be very careful with placing your intervals. The other problem with the tiger as it stands today is that the handle, which operates the bellows, has been added later and in fact obstructs the keyboard when you're playing it. Therefore, if the handle cannot be turned, you need the assistance of somebody operating the bellows by another mechanism from the back.
Neither mellifluous nor now particularly awe-inspiring as sounds go. The tiger's tone and volume may have been rather roughly adjusted when a German bomb caused extensive damage in the Second World War. The continuing health of the mechanical marvel is now the responsibility of the conservation staff at the Victoria and Albert Museum.
The inside here, with the top removed, shows the bellows for the roar and the bellows for the music.
So how does this work then, John?
The bellows are operated from the handle via the crank. The crank has a worm gear which operates a wooden cog, which if I take these front bellows away, you'll be able to see that.
Oh, I see, yes. So that turns that round.
Yes.
And that lifts the...
This operates on the lug here.
Yeah, that lifts that up, and when it gets to the long one, it falls off the end. Is that right?
That's right.
Yes, I see.
And then, continuing the mechanism through, you've got the two connecting rods from the crank. The first one operates the bellows here underneath. You've got the main reservoir bellows.
Yes.
On top here, Nick, which then will blow up these bellows, which you can feel when they...
Oh, I see, you can lift that.
Yeah. And if I revolve this, you can see how the underbellows are moving.
So that rod goes through into his chest, and that
That's
makes the
right.
bellows for his wail.
That's right, that wail makes him shout.
And the sound for that's coming from his head, so there's nothing to do with the organ part of it at all.
Nothing at all.
No.
The condition of the piece is that the actual bodywork is very fragile, having been damaged during the Blitz in the war. The mechanism on the inside, a lot of that has been redone and is in relatively good condition, but weak.
Tipu's tiger was a thing of macabre amusement, but his tiger symbol also adorned his weapons of war. Some of his troops were clad in tiger-striped uniform, and much of the military equipment carried exquisite tiger motifs. These firearms were for the Sultan's own use, an impressive pair of pistols with tigers carved on their locks. Such items are now keenly sought by collectors.
This is a fowling piece made for using or firing two charges, known as superimposed loading. So therefore you can actually fire two shots out of the same barrel. It was made for Tipu, of course, and it's absolutely covered with tiger stripes and tiger motifs. The principal and unusual part being the tiger, which is part of the stock. It's signed by an Indian craftsman, Asad Amin, and it may well be that he was in charge of finishing it or assembling it, but I don't think he made every part of it.
In contrast to the latest firearms of European manufacture, much of the equipment of Tipu's armies would have been familiar to the Sassanid Persians or to Genghis Khan. Tipu wore a coat of the finest mail. The other favoured material for armour was cloth, stitched in multiple layers and sometimes, as with this helmet, reinforced with a metal noseguard. Marcus Wellesley presented some of Tipu's cloth armour to George IV when he was Prince Regent, and it was this which sparked the monarch's interest in Tipu objects. His quiver is embroidered in a similar style and testifies to the importance of archery, particularly from horseback, as late as the end of the 18th century. Presumably the average horse archer's equipment was not decorated quite to royal standards. The other main weapon of Tipu's feared light cavalry was the sabre.
This is one of Tipu's sabres, and it's got his typical tiger hilt with the tiger's heads, and very unusually, a tiger-striped Damascus steel blade. This would have been one of his personal swords, and no doubt he used it.
It's a strange mixture, isn't it? A very ferocious individual with a very strong aesthetic sense.
Yes, well, he was a highly artistic and enlightened ruler.
When Tipu rode into battle, he was preceded by splendid banners, once more proclaiming his tiger motif to the trembling world. On the cannon manufactured at his own foundries, Tipu also made his mark.
It's an Indian 4-pounder garrison gun, and it would have been used or kept in the palace at Seringapatam. A 4-pounder gun of this kind would have been used at a range of about 200 to 400 yards, very effectively.
The armed forces of modern India are, in a sense, the descendants of both factions of the Mysore Wars. Happily, the Indian Joint Services Band now visit London's Victoria and Albert Museum in a positive spirit of cultural exchange.
The surrender of Tipu's two sons as hostages at the end of the Third Mysore War was an event which captured the imagination of the British public. One artist was actually present at the time, Robert Home, and his painting is now in the National Army Museum in London. The reason the British were so interested in this scene was really a very sentimental one in many ways, in that here was the rather portly but benign and gentlemanly Cornwallis receiving these two small 8-year-old and 10-year-old sons of Tipu clad in their long flowing muslin gowns. And the local newspaper reports absolutely gushed about the scene. Madras Courier waxes lyrical about it.
But 7 years later, the guns erupted again, and the old combatants were locked into the fourth and final Mysore War. This time, Tipu's former decisiveness and flair seemed to have deserted him.
It's always said that Hyder was born to win an empire and Tipu to lose it. Towards the end, he seems to have rather succumbed to the millstone of fate hanging around his neck and lost his real power and his vision for winning battles.
Throughout